Tonight you are exactly where you need to be. You've found your way to a quiet little corner of the night, where the world slows down, the stars begin to whisper, and soft stories drift like moonlight through the dark. I'm so glad you're here. Before we begin tonight's story, I just want to gently ask, if you find comfort in these bedtime moments, it would mean the world if you'd take a second to like this video, subscribe, or even share it with someone else who could use a little peace. Your support helps keep this cozy space glowing night after night. Now settle in, let the day melt away, and let's begin. A peddler was toiling along a dusty road carrying his pack on his back when he saw a donkey grazing by the wayside. "Good day, friend," said he. "If you have nothing to do, perhaps you would not mind carrying my load for me for a little." "If I do so, what will you give me?" said the donkey. "I will give you 2 pieces of gold," said the peddler. But he did not speak the truth, for he knew he had no gold to give. "Agreed," said the donkey. So they journeyed on together in a very friendly manner, the donkey carrying the peddler's pack, and the peddler walking by his side. After a time they met a raven who was looking for worms in the roadside, and the donkey called out to him, "Good morrow, black friend. If you are going our way, you would do well to sit upon my back and drive away the flies, which worry me sadly." "And what will you pay me to do this?" asked the raven. "Money is no object to me," said the donkey, "so I will give you 3 pieces of gold." And he too knew he was making a false promise, for he had no gold at all to give. "Agreed," said the raven. So they went on in high good humor, the donkey carrying the peddler's wares, and the raven sitting on the donkey's back driving away the flies. After a time they met a hedge sparrow, and the raven called out to it, "Good day, little cousin. Do you want to earn a little money? If so, bring me some worms from the bank as we go along, for I had no breakfast and am very hungry." "What will you give me for it?" asked the hedge sparrow. "Let us say 4 pieces of gold," said the raven grandly, "for I have saved more during my long life than I know how to spend." But he knew this was not true, for he had not saved any gold at all. "Very well," said the hedge sparrow. And so on they went, the donkey carrying the peddler's pack, and the raven keeping the flies away from the donkey, and the hedge sparrow bringing worms to the raven. Presently they saw in the distance a good-sized town, and the peddler took out from his pack some shawls and stuffs and hung them over the donkey's back that the passers-by might see and buy if they were so disposed. On the top of the other goods lay a small scarlet blanket, and when he saw it, the hedge sparrow said to the peddler, "What will you take for that little blanket? It seems to be a good one. Name your price, and you shall have it whatever it is." for I am badly in want of a blanket just now." But as the hedge sparrow had not a penny in the world, he knew he could not pay for it. "The price of the blanket is 5 pieces of gold," said the peddler. "That seems to me to be very dear," said the hedge sparrow. "I don't mind giving you 4 pieces of gold for it, but 5 is too much." "Agreed," said the peddler, and he chuckled to himself and thought, "Now I shall be able to pay the donkey. Otherwise I might have had some trouble in getting rid of him." The hedge sparrow flew to the raven's side and whispered in his ear, "Please to pay me the 4 pieces of gold you owe me, for we are coming to a town, and I must be turning back." "4 pieces of gold is really too much for bringing a few worms," said the raven. "It is absurd to expect such payment, but I will give you 3, and you shall have them almost immediately." And he bent down over the donkey's ear and whispered, "My friend, it is time you paid me the 3 pieces of gold which you promised, for the peddler will stop at this town and you will not have to go farther with him." "On thinking it over," said the donkey, "I have come to the conclusion that 3 pieces of gold are really a great deal too much to give for having a few flies driven away. You must have known that I was only joking when I said it, but I will let you have 2, though I consider that it is much more than the job was worth." And the donkey turned again to the peddler, saying, "Now, good sir, your 2 pieces of gold, if you please." "In a moment," said the peddler, and turning to the hedge sparrow said, "I really must have the money for the blanket at once." "So you shall," answered the hedge sparrow, and cried angrily to the raven, "I want my money now, and cannot wait." "In an instant," answered the raven, and again whispered to the donkey, "Why can't you pay me honestly? I should be ashamed of trying to slip out of my debts in such a way." "I won't keep you waiting a second," said the donkey, and he turned once more to the peddler and cried, "Come, give me my money. For shame, a man like you trying to cheat a poor beast like me." Then the peddler said to the hedge sparrow, "Pay me for my blanket, or I'll wring your neck." And the hedge sparrow cried to the raven, "Give me my money, or I'll peck out your eyes." And the raven croaked to the donkey, "If you don't pay me, I'll bite off your tail." And the donkey again cried to the peddler, "You dishonest wretch, pay me my money, or I'll kick you soundly." And they made such an uproar outside the walls of the town that the beadle came out to see what it was all about. Each turned to him and began to complain of the other loudly. "You are a set of rogues and vagabonds," said the beadle, "and you shall all come before the mayor, and he'll settle your quarrels pretty quickly and treat you as you deserve." At this they all begged to be allowed to go away, each one saying he did not care about being paid at all. But the beadle would not listen to them, and led them straight away to the marketplace, where the mayor sat judging the people. "Now whom have we here?" cried he. "A peddler, a donkey, a raven, and a hedge sparrow. A set of worthless vagabonds, I'll be bound. Let us hear what they have to say for themselves." On this, the peddler began to complain of the hedge sparrow, and the hedge sparrow of the raven, and the raven of the donkey, and the donkey of the peddler. The mayor did not heed them much, but he eyed the peddler's pack, and at length interrupted them and said, "I am convinced that you are a set of good-for-nothing fellows, and one is quite as bad as the other. So I order that the peddler be locked up in the prison, that the donkey be soundly well thrashed, and that the raven and the hedge sparrow both have their tail feathers pulled out, and then be turned out of the town. As for the blanket, it seems to me to be the only good thing in the whole matter, and as I cannot allow you to keep the cause of such a disturbance, I will take it for myself. Beetle, lead the prisoners away." So the beetle did as he was told, and the peddler was locked up for many days in the prison. It is very sad to think to what straits an honest man may be brought, he sighed to himself as he sat lamenting his hard fate. In future this will be a warning to me to keep clear of hedge sparrows. If the hedge sparrow had paid me as he ought, I should not be here now. Meantime, the donkey was being soundly well thrashed, and after each blow he cried, "Alas, alas! See what comes to an innocent quadruped for having to do with human beings. Had the peddler given me the money he owed, I should not now be beaten thus. In future I will never make a bargain with men." The raven and the hedge sparrow hopped out of the town by different roads, and both were very sad, for they had lost all their tail feathers, which the beetle had pulled out. "Alas!" croaked the raven, "my fate is indeed a hard one, but it serves me right for trusting a donkey who goes on his feet and cannot fly. It is truly a warning to me never again to trust anything without a beak." The hedge sparrow was quite crestfallen and could scarcely keep from tears. "It all comes of my being so taken in by that raven," he sighed. "But I should have known that these large birds are never honest. In future I will be wise, and never make a bargain with anything bigger or stronger than myself." Once there was a baker who had a very bad, violent temper, and whenever a batch of bread was spoiled, he flew into such a rage that his wife and daughters dared not go near him. One day it happened that all his bread was burnt, and on this he stamped and raved with anger. He threw the loaves all about the floor, when one, burnt blacker than the rest, broke in half, and out of it crept a tiny, thin, black man, no thicker than an eel, with long arms and legs. "What are you making all this fuss about, Master Baker?" said he. "If you will give me a home in your oven, I will see to the baking of your bread, and will answer for it that you shall never have so much as a loaf spoiled." "And pray what sort of bread would it be if you were in the oven and helped to bake it?" said the baker. "I think my customers might not like to eat it." "On the contrary," said the imp, "they would like it exceedingly. It is true that it would make them rather unhappy, but that will not hurt you, as you need not eat it yourself." "Why should it make them unhappy?" said the baker. "If it is good bread it won't do anyone harm, and if it is bad they won't buy it." "It will taste very good," replied the imp, "but it will make all who eat it discontented, and they will think themselves very unfortunate whether they are so or no. But this will not do you any harm, and I promise you that you shall sell as much as you wish." "Agreed," said the baker. So the little imp crept into the oven and curled himself into the darkness behind, and the baker saw no more of him. But next day he made a great batch of bread, and though he took no heed of the time when he put it in and drew it out just as he wanted it, it was done quite right, neither too dark nor too light, and the baker was in high good humor. The first person who tasted the bread was the Chief Justice. He came down to breakfast in high spirits, for he had just heard that an old aunt was dead and had left him a great deal of money. So he kissed his wife and chucked his daughters under the chin and told them that he had good news for them. His old aunt had left him 20,000 pounds in her will. On this his wife clapped her hands for joy, and his daughters ran to him and kissed him and begged him to let them have some of it. So they all sat down to breakfast in great glee, but no sooner had the justice tasted the bread than his face fell. "This is excellent bread," he said, taking a large slice. "I wish everything else were as good." And he heaved a deep sigh. "Why?" cried his wife, who had not yet begun to eat. "This morning I am sure there is nothing for you to complain of." "Nay," said the mayor, "it is very nice to have 20,000 pounds, but think how much nicer it would have been if it had been 30. How much more one could have done with that. Or even if it had been 25,000 pounds, or even 21. 21,000 pounds is a very nice sum of money, but 20,000 pounds is no good at all. I am not sure that it would not be better not to have had any." "Nonsense," cried his wife, who was now eating her breakfast also. "You are very wicked to be so discontented. But one thing I do say, it would have been much nicer if we had had it when we were young and better able to enjoy it. Money is very little use to people at our time of life. It would have been really nice if we had had it 15 years ago. As it is, I can't say I care much for it, and it makes me sad to think we did not get it before." "Nay," cried the daughters, "in that case how much better it would have been for us to have it instead of you. We are young and able to enjoy ourselves, and we could have given you a little of it if you'd liked, but we could have been very happy with the rest. As it is no pleasure to us." So they fell to quarreling about the money, and by the time breakfast was done, they all had tears in their eyes and felt discontented and unhappy. The next person to eat the bread was the village doctor. All night long he had been sitting up with a man who had broken his leg, and he had feared lest he should die. But as morning came he saw he would live. So he returned home to his wife in very good spirits, although he was sadly tired. The wife had already had her breakfast, but she had made all ready for her husband, with a loaf of the baker's new bread. "See, dear husband," she said, "here is your breakfast, and some nice bread quite new, because I know you like it. How glad we ought to be that this poor man is likely to live." "Yes, indeed," said the doctor. "Being up all night is tiring work, but I don't grudge it when I know that it does some good." And then he began to eat. "I am not sure, after all, that I have done such a good thing in curing this man. It is true that his broken leg hurt him very much, but perhaps when he is well again, he may break his back, and that would be much worse. Perhaps I had better have left him to die. I dare say when he is quite well, all kinds of misfortunes will befall him. I had much better have let him alone." "Why?" cried his wife in surprise. "What are you saying, husband? Are you not a doctor, and is it not your business to cure people? And when you succeed, ought you not to be glad?" "I wish I were not a doctor," said the husband, sighing. "It would be much better if there were no doctors at all." And he sat and lamented, and nothing his wife could say could cheer him. In a pretty little cottage near the doctor's house lived a young couple who were newly married and were as happy as the day was long. Their cottage was covered with roses and filled with pretty things, and they had everything their hearts could desire. This morning they both came down smiling and happy, and the young wife kissed her husband and sang for joy. So they sat down to breakfast, chattering like two birds in a nest. But no sooner had the husband tasted the bread than his face fell, and he was silent for a time. Then he said, "It is a very terrible thing to think how happy we are, for it cannot last. Something melancholy is sure to happen to us. Until it comes, we shall live in dread of it, for we know happiness never lasts. And this is a thought that makes me very sad." The wife had now also taken some bread. "What is this you are saying?" she said. "How can you think such dreadful things? I do not like you when you talk like that, and I think it is very hard for me to be married to a man who wants to be unhappy." "The best thing we can hope for," said the husband, sighing, "is for some great misfortune to befall us. Then we should be all right, for we should know then that we knew the worst that could come. As it is, we shall live in suspense all our days." "Now," cried his wife, "I am indeed unfortunate. What could be worse than to have a husband who does not like being happy? I wish I had married someone else, or indeed had no husband at all." So both began to grumble, and at last to quarrel, and finally both were crying with anger. Not far out of the village was a large, pleasant farmhouse standing amongst fields, and the farmer was a hale, bright man with a good wife and pretty children. He was very busy just now getting in the corn, for it was autumn, and he stood among his men, directing them as they worked in the fields. He had not had time to have a proper breakfast before going to work, but his wife sent some out to him with some of the baker's new bread, and he sat down under a tree to eat it. As he did so, he looked up at the farmhouse, and thought with pride that it was the largest farm in all the country round, and that it had belonged to his father, and his grandfather, and his great-grandfather before him. "'Tis a fine old house, for sure," thought he, as he took a large piece of bread. "'Tis so well built and strong. But no sooner had he swallowed a mouthful than his thoughts changed. "What should I do if it were to fall down and crush me some day?" he said to himself. "After all, 'tis only built of brick, and might tumble any day. How much stronger it would have been if it had been built of stone. Then it would not have been nearly so likely to give way. Really, when my great-grandfather built it, he should have thought of this. How selfish all men are." And he became quite unhappy lest his house should fall, and lamented while he ate. In the kitchen the farmer's wife was very busy cooking and cleaning, and scarcely stopped to eat till near midday. Then she took up a piece of bread and cheese, and leant against the window as she ate it, that she might watch for her eldest girl and boy, Janie and Jimmy, who would now be returning from school. "Our baker really bakes very decent bread," said she. "'Tis almost as good as my own." And she went on eating till she saw her two children coming through the fields together. "Here they come," said she. "How bonny they look! Really, I ought to be very proud of them. I don't know which is the prettier, Janie or Jimmy, but 'tis a pity for sure that Janie is the eldest. It would be much better if Jimmy were older than she. 'Tis a bad thing for the sister to be older than the brother. Now, if he were her age and she were his, that would be really nice. For then he could take care of her and see after her. But, as it is, she will try to direct him, and boys never like to obey their sisters. I really almost think I had better not have had any children at all." And the tears filled her eyes, and when her girl and boy ran into her, her face was very sad, and she seemed to be scarcely glad to see them. So things went on all over the village. Each one, as he tasted the bread, grew discontented and angry, till at last all the people went about grumbling and complaining, or else shedding tears outright. Only the baker himself was cheerful and merry, and sang as he kneaded his dough, and sold it to his customers with a light heart, for his trade had never been so good. Every atom of bread he made was sold at once, so he cared not one whit for the trouble of the other people, and laughed to himself when he heard them complaining, and thought of the words of the dark little elf, one day as he stood kneading at the door and whistling to himself. The doctor walked past and looked angrily at him. "What on earth are you making that whistling for?" he asked. "I declare one would think that you were as happy as a man could be." "And so I am," said the baker. "And so I should think were you too, for you have nothing to trouble you." "Nothing to trouble me, forsooth!" cried the doctor in a rage. "How dare you insult me in this way? I tell you what it is, my fine fellow, I think you are very impertinent, and if I have any more of your impudence I will take my stick and thrash you soundly. It really is not to be borne that one man should be allowed to tell another that he has nothing to complain of." "Nay, you can have as much to complain of as you like, so long as I have not," cried the baker, and he laughed loudly. This only made the doctor angrier still, and he was just going to seize the baker when up came the farmer. "Was there ever such a village as this?" he cried. "It is not fit for anyone to live in. There is always such fighting and quarreling going on. What is the matter here?" "Matter enough," cried the doctor. Here is a fellow dares to tell me I have nothing to complain of, nor he either." "This is monstrous," said the farmer. "He deserves to be hung. How dares he say such a thing on such a wretched day as this, with such a blue sky and such a bright sun?" "Why, Master Farmer," cried the baker, "yesterday you grumbled because it was raining, and now you grumble because it is fine." "And I tell you that it is enough to make one grumble," said the farmer. "It should have been fair yesterday and should have rained today. You ought to be ashamed of such talk, Master Baker, and I think it would serve you justly right if we took you before the justice and let us see what he thinks of your conduct." "Nay," cried the baker, beginning to be frightened. "What have I done that I am to be taken before the justice?" "What have you done indeed?" said the doctor. "We will see if the justice cannot find that out pretty quickly." So they seized the baker and dragged him away in spite of himself, and as they pulled him through the village, the people thronged about them and followed till there was quite a large crowd. The justice sat at his door smoking a pipe, with tears in his eyes. "Now what is all this uproar for?" he cried. "Am I never to be left in peace? How hard is the life of a justice!" But he got up and came out on the steps to meet them. "See here," cried the doctor. "Here is a man who says he has nothing to complain of, and we have brought him to you, to know if he is to be punished or to be allowed to go on talking like this." "Certainly not," cried the justice, "or we shall soon have the whole village in an uproar. Let him be taken to the marketplace, and I will order that he be publicly flogged by the soldiers." At this the poor baker burst out crying and entreated to be let off, saying that now indeed he had plenty to complain of. But at this the justice was angrier still. "Then," said he, "you certainly deserve to be flogged for having told an untruth before, when you said you had not. Take him away, and do as I bid." So they dragged the baker off to the marketplace and made a ring round him so that he could not escape. And then there came down 2 or 3 soldiers with ropes in their hands, and they seized him and began to beat him before all the crowd. But by this time all the people were so enraged against him that a number of them cried, "Let us go to his house and pull it down." So off they ran to the baker's house and broke the windows and knocked about the furniture, and then some of them fell on the oven and wrenched off the door, and others seized the pokers and tongs and smashed in its sides, and in the hurry and scuffle the little dark man crept out of the oven and scuttled away unseen by anyone. But no sooner had he gone than a great change came across the people. The soldiers on the green stopped beating the baker and looked at each other aghast, and the justice called out, "Stop! What is all this uproar about? And what has this man done that you are beating him without my orders?" And the people in the crowd whispered to each other, "It is true. What has he done?" And they slunk away looking ashamed. The justice also at first looked somewhat ashamed of himself, but he drew himself up, and looking very important, said, "There, my man, you are forgiven for this once, and now go your way and see that you behave better in future." And then he walked away with much dignity, So the baker was left alone in the marketplace, and he cried for rage and pain. "This all comes of the oven imp," cried he as he limped home. "Directly I get home I will drive him out of my oven and away from my house. Better to have 100 batches of bread spoiled than to be flogged for saying one is happy." But when he reached his house, the little dark man was nowhere to be found. There was naught but the broken oven with its sides battered in. The baker mended the oven, and from that time forth his bread was just like other people's. But for all that he had learnt to be quite contented, for now he knew that there were worse things than having his loaves burnt black, and he was only too well pleased to take his chance with other people, without the help of fairy folk. As for the little black imp, he was never heard of more, and the people in the village soon recovered their good humor, and were just as happy and contented as they had been before they tasted the bread of discontent. Old King Roland lay upon his deathbed, and as he had no son to reign after him, he sent for his 3 nephews, Aldevrand, Aldebert, and Alderet, and addressed them as follows: "My dear nephews, I feel that my days are now drawing to an end, and one of you will have to be king when I am dead. But there is no pleasure in being king. My people have been difficult to govern and never content with what I did for them, so that my life has been a hard one, and though I have watched you all closely, still I know not which is most fit to wear the crown. So my wish is that you should each try it in turn. You, Aldevrand, as you are the oldest, shall be king first, and if you reign happily, all well and good. But if you fail, let Aldebert take your place, and if he fail, let him give it up to Alderete, and then you will know which is the best fitted to govern." On this the 3 young men all thanked their uncle, and each one declared that he would do his best. And soon after old King Roland died and was buried with great state and ceremony. So now Aldevrand was to be king, and he was crowned, and there were great rejoicings everywhere. "'Tis a fine thing to be king," cried he in much glee. "Now I can amuse myself and do just as I please, and there will be no one to stop me, and I will lie in bed as late as I like in the morning. For who dares blame one if one is king?" Next morning the Prime Minister and the Chancellor came to the palace to see the new king and settle affairs of state. But they were told that His Majesty was in bed and had given orders that no one should disturb him. "This is a bad beginning," sighed the Prime Minister. "Very bad," echoed the Chancellor. When they came back to the palace later in the day, the king was playing at battledore and shuttlecock with some of his gentlemen, and was very angry at being interrupted in his game. "A pretty thing," he cried, "that I the king am to be sent for hither and thither as if I were a lackey. They must go away and come another time." And on hearing this, the Prime Minister and Chancellor looked graver still. But next morning there came the Commander-in-Chief and the Lord High Admiral, as well as the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, all wanting to have an audience with the king. And as he was not out of bed and they could not wait any longer, they all stood outside his bedroom door and knocked to gain admittance, and at last he came out in a towering rage. and throwing them his crown, cried, "Here, let one of my cousins be king, for I will not bear this longer. It is much more trouble than it is worth. So Aldebert or Alderete may try it and see how they like it. But as for me, I have had enough of it." And he ran downstairs and out of the palace door, leaving the Prime Minister and the Chancellor and the General and Admiral staring at each other in dismay. Aldovrand walked out of the town unnoticed and turned towards the country, whistling cheerily to himself. When he had gone some way in the fields, he came to a farmhouse, and in a meadow near, the farmer stood talking to his men. Aldovrand went straight up to him and, touching his hat, asked if he could give him any work. "Work?" cried the farmer, little thinking he was talking to his late king. "Why, what sort of work can you do?" "Well," said Aldovrand, "I am not very fond of running about, but if you want anyone to mind your sheep, or keep the birds from your corn, I could do that nicely." "I tell you what you can do if you like," said the farmer. "I am wanting a goose boy to take care of my geese. See, there they are on the common. All you will have to do is to see that they don't stray away, and to drive them in at night." "That will suit me exactly," cried Aldovrand. "I will begin at once." And he went straight on to the common, and when he had collected the geese together, lay down to watch them in high good humor. "This is capital," he cried, "and much better than being king at the palace. Here there is no prime minister or chancellor to come worrying." And he lay watching the geese all day very contentedly. When the prime minister and the chancellor knew that Aldovrand was really gone, they went in a great hurry to Aldebert to tell him that it was his turn to be king. But when he heard how his cousin had run away, he looked frightened. "I will do my best," quoth he, "but I really know very little about the matter. However, you must tell me, and I will do whatever you direct." At hearing this, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were delighted. "Now we have got the right sort of king," they said, and both wagged their heads with joy. So King Aldebert was crowned, and there were great rejoicings all over the country. Early next morning he was up all ready to receive his ministers, and first came the Prime Minister. "Your Majesty," said he, "I come to you on an affair of much importance. A great part of our city is falling down, and it is very necessary that we should rebuild it at once. If you will command it, therefore, I will see that it is done." "I have no doubt you are right," said the king. "Pray let them begin building at once." And the Prime Minister went away delighted. Scarcely had he gone when in came the commander-in-chief. "Your Majesty," said he, "I wish to lay before you the state of our army. Our soldiers have had a great deal of fighting to do lately, and are beginning to be discontented. But the late king, your uncle, would never attend to their wants." "Pray do what you like," said King Aldebert. "To satisfy them," said the commander-in-chief, "I think that we should double their pay. This would keep them in a good humor, and all will go well." "By all means, that will certainly be the best way," said Aldebert. Let it be given to them at once." And on hearing this, the commander-in-chief went away right merrily. When he had gone, there came in the chancellor with a long face. "Your Majesty," he said, "I have this morning been to the treasury, and I find that there is scarcely any money left. The late king, your uncle, spent so much in spite of all I could say that now it is almost all gone. Your Majesty must now save all you can for the next year or two, and you ought also to lower the soldiers' pay and stop all public works." "I have no doubt you are quite right," cried the king. "You know best. Let it be done as you wish." But next morning the Prime Minister, with a frowning face, "How is this, your Majesty?" cried he. "Just as we are beginning our buildings, the Chancellor comes and tells us that we are not to have any money to build with." He had not done speaking when the commander-in-chief burst into the room, unable to conceal his rage. "Yesterday your Majesty told me that all the soldiers should have double pay, and this morning I hear that instead of that, their wages are to be lowered." Here he was interrupted by the Chancellor, who came running in looking much excited. "Your Majesty," he cried, "did you not yesterday say we were now to begin saving, and that I was not to allow any more money to be spent, and that the army must do with less pay?" And then all three began to quarrel among themselves. When he saw how angry they were, King Aldebert took off his crown and said, "I am sure you are each of you quite right, but I think I am scarcely fit to be a king. Indeed, I think you had better find my cousin Alderete and let him be crowned, and I will seek my fortune elsewhere." And he had slipped out of the room and run downstairs and out of the palace before they could stop him. He went briskly down the high road into the country, the same way that Aldevrand had gone. After he had gone some way, he met a traveling tinker who sat by the roadside mending tin cans, with his little fire at his side. Aldebert stood watching him, and at last said, "How cleverly you mend those holes! You must lead a pleasant life, going from house to house in the green lanes mending wares. Do you think I could learn how to do it if you would teach me?" The tinker, who was an old man, looked at him and said, "Well, I don't mind giving you a trial if you like to come with me, for I want a strong young man sometimes to help me wheel my little cart, and I'll teach you my trade, and we'll see what you can make of it." So Aldebert was delighted and went with the tinker. When they knew he was really gone, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor looked at each other in dismay. "This will never do," cried they. "We must go at once to Prince Alderet, and let us hope he may do better than his cousins." When Prince Alderet heard that it was his turn to reign, he jumped for joy. "Now," cried he, "at last I will show what a king should really be like. My cousins were neither of them any good, but they shall now see how different I will be." So he was crowned, and again there were great rejoicings all over the country. Next day he sat in state to receive the Chancellor and Prime Minister and hear what they had to say. "My friends," said he to them, "a good king ought to be like a father to his people, and this is what I mean to be. I mean to arrange everything for them myself, and if they will only obey me and do as I direct, they are sure to be both prosperous and happy." On hearing this, both Prime Minister and Chancellor looked anxious, and the Chancellor said, "I fear, Your Majesty, your people will not like to be too much meddled with." At this the king was very angry and bid them see about their own business and not presume to teach him his. When they had gone, he went to take a drive in his city, that he might see it and know it well. But directly he returned to the palace, he sent for the Prime Minister, and when he had arrived, said, "I already see much to be altered in my kingdom. I do not like the houses in which many of the people dwell, nor indeed the dresses they wear. But what strikes me most of all is, that wherever I go I smell a strong smell of pea soup. Now, nothing is so unwholesome as pea soup, and therefore it would not be right in me to allow the people to go on eating it. I command, therefore, that no one shall again make or eat pea soup within my realm on pain of death." Again the Prime Minister looked very grave and began to say, "Your Majesty, your subjects will surely not like to be hindered from eating and drinking what pleases them." But the king cried out in a rage, "Go at once and do as I bid you." So the Prime Minister had to obey. Early next morning when the king arose, he heard a great hubbub under his window, and when he went to see what it was, he saw a vast mob of people all shouting, "The king, the king! Where is this king who would dictate to us what we shall eat and drink?" When he saw them, he was terribly frightened, and at once sent off for the Prime Minister and Chancellor to come to his aid. "Pray go and tell them to eat what they like," he cried when they arrived. "But do you know, I find it will not at all suit me to be king. You had best try Aldevrand or Aldebert again." And so saying, he took off his crown and laid it down, and slipped away out of the palace before either Prime Minister or Chancellor could stop him. He went out of the back door and ran and ran and ran, till he had left the town far behind and came to the country fields and lanes, the same way that his two cousins had gone. And as he went, he met a sweep trudging along, carrying his long brooms over his shoulder. "My friend," cried Alderet, stopping him, "of all things in the world I should like to be a sweep and learn how to sweep chimneys. May I go with you, and will you teach me your trade?" The sweep looked surprised, but said, yes, Alderet could go with him if he chose, and as he was now going on to the farmhouses, on the road, to sweep the chimneys, he could begin at once. So Alderete went with the sweep, carrying some of his brooms for him. After a time the people outside the palace grew quiet, when they heard that the king would not interfere with them further. And when all was again still, the Prime Minister and Chancellor went to seek the king, but he was nowhere to be found in the palace. "This will never do," cried they. "We must have a king somehow, so we had best have back one of the others." So they started to look for Aldevrand or Aldebert. They sought them all over the city, and at last they came into the same country road down which the three cousins had gone. And there they saw Aldevrand lying in a meadow watching his flock of geese. "Good day, my friends," cried he when he saw them. "And how are things going on at the palace? I hope my cousins like reigning better than I did. Now, here I lie peacefully all day long and watch my geese, and it is much nicer than being king." Then the Prime Minister and Chancellor told him all that had happened, and begged that he would come back with them to the palace again. But at this Aldevrand laughed outright. "No, indeed," cried he. "I would not be king again for any man living. You had best go and seek my cousin Aldebert and ask him. I saw him go down the road with a tinker, helping him to mend his tins. So go and ask him, and leave me to mind my geese in peace." So the Prime Minister and the Chancellor had to seek still farther. They trudged on, till at last they met Aldebert, who sat by the side of the road mending a tin kettle and whistling cheerily. "Heyday! Whom have we here?" cried he. "The Prime Minister and the Chancellor. And I'm right glad to see you both. See how clever I have grown. I am learning to be a tinker, and I mended that hole all myself." Then the Prime Minister and Chancellor begged him to leave his pots and come back to the palace and be king. But he fell to work again, harder than ever, and said, "No, indeed. Go and ask my cousins, who are both much cleverer than I. I really don't do for it at all, but I make a very good tinker, and I like that much better." "Then what can we do?" cried the Prime Minister, "for we don't know where Alderet has gone." "I saw him go by here with a sweep a little time ago," said Aldebert. "And he went into that farmhouse yonder, so you had best seek him there." So the Prime Minister and the Chancellor went on to the farmhouse. At the door stood the farmer's wife, but when they asked her if she had seen the king go by, she stared with surprise. "Nay," said she, "no one has been here but our sweep and his apprentice. He is in there sweeping the chimney now." On hearing this, the Prime Minister and Chancellor at once ran into the farmhouse and saw the old sweep standing by the kitchen fireplace. "And where is the other sweep?" cried they. "He has gone up the chimney and is just going to begin sweeping," said the old man. "So if you want to speak to him, you must shout." So they shouted and called, "King Alderet, King Alderet," as loud as ever they could, but he did not hear. Then the Chancellor knelt in front of the grate and put his head up the chimney and called, "King Alderete, King Alderet, it is the Prime Minister and I, the Chancellor, come to fetch your Majesty back to the palace." When Alderete heard him up the chimney, he trembled in every limb, but he replied, "I'm not going to come down. I don't want to be king. I am going to be a sweep, and I like that much better. I shan't come down till you are gone away, and now you had best go quickly, for I'm going to begin sweeping, and all the soot will fall on your head." And then they heard the rattle of the broom in the chimney, and a whole shower of soot fell on the Chancellor's head. And now as we come to the end of this session, if you're still awake, I would like you to feel the calm you've created within yourself. You've given your mind and body such a beautiful gift a moment to simply be. Let that sense of peace stay with you as you move through the rest of your night. If you'd like, you can stay here a little longer.